This is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me since I started installing. The no-lift install system really started with a drawing. Back in 2009, 2010, my uncle, who had spent a lot of time around our fab shop, came to me one day in my office and he said, "You know, you got to build a cart for your installers." And he showed me a picture that he'd sketched out of a cart that lifted and then rotated into the horizontal position. But at the time, we were in survival mode. We were just trying to keep our company in business, and so I literally just rejected the idea out of hand. Never even gave it a second thought. Was just simply too busy to think about it. But about 3 years later, we had an installer show up for work one day and he was really hurting, groaning, had pinched something in his back the day before. They'd carried a pretty large countertop up a flight of stairs and putting the countertop up onto the cabinet. He was leaning over the cabinet to try and put it into its final place, and he pinched something in his back. Next morning he showed up for work hurting, like a lot of good installers do. And so that day we had a pretty large corner sink countertop to install, and so I was feeling guilty about the fact that he was hurting and still at work. I said, "I'll go out and help you guys put that in." So I got to the job site, big corner sink in this kitchen, and I opted to take the heavy end, the corner sink end. And so we did 1, 2, 3, one guy on the end, me on the other end, a guy in the middle. We picked that big countertop up, and as I was leaning over that corner sink cabinet to set the thing down, I pinched something in my back. And that was really the last straw. I'd been in the business for probably 15 years at that point, and I literally left that job site saying to myself, I'm either going to solve this problem or I'm getting out of the business. The accumulated sort of guilt, my own physical pain from installing years before, the knowledge that my installers were hurting and still coming to work every day. I literally drove back from that job site deciding in my mind I was either going to build the cart sketched out for me years before, or I was going to get out of the granite countertop business altogether. And so I literally went back to the shop that day, turned around, went to Harbor Freight. I bought a bandsaw cutoff for metal. I bought a welder. I bought a drill press. I bought a little sander, and I basically told everybody, don't bug me. I am going to build a cart that's going to make granite countertop installations better. And so I went to work. During the day, I was cutting, adjusting, dry fitting. At night, I was going back down to the shop, testing different structures to see if it would support the weight of the countertops. And basically worked for about 2 or 3 weeks straight until we had our first prototype of the original design. And I welded that concept, this frame system with the rotating cable, I welded that to an old sheetrock cart. And the next day we took that prototype to a job site. And I will never forget that installer that a few weeks before, who had that pinched, muscle in his back, as he was putting the countertop onto the cabinet, he said, "Aaron, this is the greatest thing that has ever happened to me since I started installing."
Aaron, this is like by far the coolest that's ever happened to me in installing.
And at that point I knew we're maybe onto something here. And so it was just the first prototype. We began to adjust it. We began to make revisions to it. I'd ask the guys every day, "Did you take the cart out?" And they'd say, "Nah, the wheels don't work very well on it." And so we'd change the wheels. And then next day, "Did you take the cart out?" No, they always had a reason for why it didn't work as well as it should have. And we just continued to develop it. We continued to evolve it, to change it, and basically to listen to their feedback. And over the course of the next year, we made about 4 complete revisions to that design. We tried out different lifting mechanisms. We had like scissor jack, changing the tire on a car. We started with 1, then we did 2, then we put a hydraulic car jack on it. Eventually I took the tongue off of a trailer jack, cut it apart. I welded that to the cart and then welded a drill bit fitting onto the end of that shaft so we could use a drill to raise and lower the cart frame. And we just systematically worked through the bugs in that design until it was workable. And every time our installers would give us an excuse as to why they didn't take it out, we'd say, "Well, be more specific." The frame's too big, so we'd shrink the frame. The rollers don't work, so we changed the rollers. The lifting mechanism's just too difficult if you have to crawl underneath the cart to raise or lower it, while you got the piece horizontal. So we eventually adopted an electric actuator with a remote control. And so all along, hearing this feedback, the criticisms, in a sense, the pessimism from our installers saying it's never going to be what we really need, we kept saying to ourselves, if we can ever get this cart designed to the point where they refuse to leave the shop without it, we'll know we've got a sufficient design. And it was about a year and a half later, I'll never forget, another one of our installers came to me and he said, Aaron, I will never go to another job site without this cart. And that was the point at which we knew we had a product that had the potential of transforming the industry.